The Federalist 11. The utility of the Union in respect to commercial relations and a navy. Hamilton for the Independent General. To the people of the state of New York, the importance of the Union in a commercial light is one of those points about which there is little room to entertain a difference of opinion and which has, in fact, commanded the most general assent of men who have any acquaintance with the subject. This applies as well to our intercourse with foreign countries as with each other. There are appearances, too, authorize a supposition that the adventurous spirit which distinguishes the commercial character of America has already excited uneasy sensations in several of the maritime powers of Europe. They seem to be apprehensive of our too great interference in that carrying trade, which is the support of their navigation and the foundation of their naval strength. Those of them which have colonies in America look forward to what this country is capable of becoming with painful solicitude. They foresee the dangers that may threaten their American dominions from the neighborhood of states which have all the dispositions and would possess all the means requisite to the creation of a powerful marine. Impressions of this kind will naturally indicate the policy of fostering divisions among us and of depriving us, as far as possible, of an active commerce in our own bottoms. This would answer the threefold purpose of preventing our interference in their navigation, of monopolizing the profits of our trade, and of clipping the wings by which we might soar to a dangerous greatness. Didn't prudence forbid the detail, it wouldn't be difficult to trace by facts the workings of this policy to the cabinets of ministers. If we continue united, we may counteract a policy so unfriendly to our prosperity in a variety of ways, by prohibitory regulations extending at the same time throughout the states. We may oblige foreign countries to bid against each other for the privileges of our markets. The assertion will not appear chimerical to those who are able to appreciate the importance of the markets of 3 millions of people, increasing in rapid progression, for the most part exclusively addicted to agriculture, and likely from local circumstances to remain so. To any manufacturing nation, and the immense difference there would be to the trade and the navigation of such a nation, between a direct communication in its own ships and an indirect conveyance of its products and their returns to and from America in the ships of another country. Suppose, for instance, we had a government in America capable of excluding Great Britain from all our parts. What would be the probable operation of this step upon her politics? Would it not enable us to negotiate with the fairest prospect of success for commercial privileges of the most valuable and extensive kind in the dominions of that kingdom? When these questions have been asked upon other occasions, they have received a plausible but not a solid or satisfactory answer. It has been said that prohibitions on our part would produce no change in the system of Britain, because she could prosecute her trade with us through the medium of the Dutch, who would be her immediate customers and paymasters for those articles which were wanted for the supply of our markets. But wouldn't her navigation be materially injured by the loss of the important advantage of being her own carrier in that trade? Wouldn't the principal part of its profits be intercepted by the Dutch as a compensation for their agency and risk? Wouldn't the mere circumstance of freight occasion a considerable deduction? Wouldn't so securities and intercourse facilitate the competitions of other nations by enhancing the price of British commodities in our markets, and by transferring to other hands the management of this interesting branch of the British commerce? A mature consideration of the objects suggested by these questions will justify a belief that the real disadvantages to Britain from such a stage of things, conspiring with the possessions of a great part of the nation in favor of the American trade, and with the importunities of the West Indian Islands, would produce a relaxation in her present system, and would lead us into the enjoyment of privileges in the markets of those islands elsewhere, from which our trade would derive the most substantial benefits. Such a point gained from the British government, and which couldn't be expected without an equivalent in exemptions and immunities in our markets, would be likely to have a corresponding effect on the conduct of other nations who wouldn't be inclined to see themselves altogether supplanted in our trade. A future resource for influencing the conduct of European nations toward us in this respect would arise from the establishment of a federal navy. There can be no doubt that the continuance of the Union under an efficient government would put it in our power at a period not very distant to create a navy which, if it couldn't vie with those of the great maritime powers, would at least be of a respectable weight if thrown into the scale of either of the two contending parties. This would be more peculiarly the case in relation to the operations in the West Indies. A few ships of the line set opportunely to the reinforcement of either side would often be sufficient to decide the fate of a campaign, or the event of which interests of the greatest magnitude were suspended. Our position is, in this respect, a most commanding one, and if to this consideration we add that of the usefulness of supplies from this country in the prosecution of military operations in the West Indies, it will readily be perceived that a situation so favorable would enable us to bargain with great advantage for commercial privileges. A price would be set not only upon our friendship, but upon our neutrality. By a steady adherence to the Union, we may hope in law and to become the arbiter of Europe in America, and to be able to incline the balance of European competitions in this part of the world as our interest may dictate. But in the reverse of this eligible situation, we shall discover that the rivalships of the parts would make them tricks upon each other, and would frustrate all the tempting advantages which nature has kindly placed within our reach. In a state so insignificant, our commerce would be a prey to the wanton intermeddlings of all nations at war with each other, who have nothing to fear from us, would with little scruple or remorse supply their wants by depredations on our property as often as it fell in their way. The rights of neutrality will only be respected when they are defended by an adequate power. A nation despicable by its weakness forfeits even the privilege of being neutral. Under a vigorous national government, the natural strength and the resources of the country directed to a common interest would baffle all the combinations of European jealousy to restrain our growth. This situation would even take away the motive to such combinations by inducing an impracticability of success. An active commerce, an extensive navigation, and a flourishing marine would then be the offspring of moral and physical necessity. We might defy the little arts of the little politicians to control or vary the irresistible and unchangeable course of nature. But in a state of disunion, these combinations might exist and might operate with success. It would be in the power of the maritime nations availing themselves of our universal impotence to prescribe the conditions of our political existence. And as they have a common interest in being our carriers, and still more in preventing our becoming theirs. They would in all probability combine to embarrass our navigation in such a manner as would in effect destroy it, and confine us to a passive commerce. We should then be compelled to content ourselves with the first price of our commodities, and to see the profits of our trade snatched from us to enrich our enemies and persecutors. That unequaled spirit of enterprise, which signalizes the genius of the American merchants and the navigators, and which is in itself an inexhaustible mine of national wealth, would be stifled and lost, and poverty and disgrace would overspread a country which, with wisdom, might make herself the admiration and the envy of the world. There were rights of great moment to the trade of America, which were rights of the Union. I allude to the fisheries, to the navigation of the Western Lakes, and to that of the Mississippi. The dissolution of the Confederacy would give room for delicate questions concerning the future existence of these rights, which is the interest of more powerful partners would hardly fail to resolve to our disadvantage. The disposition of Spain with regard to the Mississippi needs no comment. France and Britain are concerned with us in the fisheries and view them at the utmost moment to their navigation. They, of course, would hardly remain long indifferent to that decided mastery of which experience has shown us to be possessed in this valuable branch of traffic, and by which we are able to undersell those nations in their own markets. What more natural than that they should be disposed to exclude from the list such dangerous competitors? This branch of trade ought not to be considered as a partial benefit. All the navigating states may, in different degrees, advantageously participate in it, and under circumstances of greater extension of mercantile capital, wouldn't be unlikely to do it, as a nursery of seamen it now is, or when time shall have more nearly assimilated the principles of navigation in the several states, will become a universal resource. To the establishment of a navy it must be indispensable. To this great national object, a navy union will contribute in various ways. Every institution will grow and flourish in proportion to the quantity and the extent of the means concentrated towards its formation and support. A navy of the United States, as it would embrace the resources of war, is an object far less remote than a navy of any single state or partial confederacy, which would only embrace the resources of a single part. It happens indeed that different portions of confederated America possess some peculiar advantage for this essential establishment. The more southern states furnish in greater abundance certain kinds of naval stores, tar, pitch, and turpentine. Their wood for the construction of ships is also a more solid and lasting texture. The difference in the duration of the ships of which the navy might be composed, if chiefly constructed of southern would be of signal importance either in the view of naval strength or of national economy. Some of the southern and of the middle states yield a greater plenty of iron and of better quality. Seamen must chiefly be drawn from the northern half. The necessity of naval protection to external or maritime commerce doesn't require a particular elucidation, no more than the conduciveness of that species of commerce to the prosperity of a navy. In Austria, the intercourse between the states themselves will advance the trade of each by an interchange of their respective products, not only for the supply of a reciprocal wants at home, but for the exportation to foreign markets. The veins of commerce in every part will be replenished and will acquire additional motion and vigor from the free circulation of the commodities of every part. Commercial enterprise will have much greater scope from the diversity in the productions of different states. When the staple of one fails from a bad harvest or unproductive crop, it can call to its aid the staple of another. The variety not less than the value of products for exportation contributes to the activity of foreign commerce. It can be conducted upon much better terms with a large number of materials of a given value than with a small number of materials of the same value. Arising from the competitions of trade and from the fluctuations of markets, particular articles may be in great demand at a certain period and unsellable at others, but if there be a variety of articles, it can scarcely happen that they should all be at one time in the latter predicament, and on this account the operations of the merchant will be less liable to any considerable obstruction or stagnation. The speculative trader will at once perceive the force of these observations and will acknowledge that the aggregate balance of the commerce of the United States would be fair to be much more favorable than that of the 13 states without union or with partial unions. It may perhaps be replied to this that whether the states are united or disunited, there would still be an intimate intercourse between them, which would answer the same ends. This intercourse would be further interrupted and narrowed by a multiplicity of courses, which in the course of these papers have been amply detailed. A unity of commercial as well as political interests can only result from a unity of government. There are other points of view in which this subject might be placed of a striking and animating kind, but they would lead us too far into the regions of futurity and would involve topics not proper for a newspaper discussion. I shall briefly observe that our situation invites and our interests prompt us to aim at an incident in the system of American affairs. The world may politically as well as geographically be divided into four parts, each having a distinct set of interests. Happily for the other three, Europe, by her arms and by her negotiations, by force and by fraud, has in different degrees extended her dominion over them all. Africa, Asia, and America have successively felt her domination. The superiority she has long maintained has tempted her to plume herself as the mistress of the world, and to consider the rest of mankind as created for her benefit. Men admired as profound philosophers have in direct terms attributed to her inhabitants a physical superiority, and have bravely asserted that all animals, and with them the human species, degenerate in American, that even dogs cease to bark after having breathed a while in our atmosphere. Facts have too long supported these arrogant pretensions of the Europeans. It belongs to us to vindicate the horror of the human race and to teach that seeming brother moderation. Union will enable us to do it. Disunion will add another victim to his triumphs. Let Americans disdain to be the instruments of European greatness. Let the 13 states band together in a strict and indissoluble union, concur in erecting one great American system superior to the control of all transatlantic force or influence, and able to dictate the terms of the connection between the old and the new world. Publius.